When you look at any city from above, what do you really see? Yeah, you see the buildings, the roads, a little bit of green space, but you also see these huge, sprawling seas of asphalt. Today, we're diving into one of the most common but totally overlooked parts of modern life, the parking lot.
We usually just think of parking as, a convenience. It's just a place to leave your car, right? But the thing is, the need for parking pretty much dictates what our cities look and feel like. It shapes how far apart buildings are, how traffic flows. It really is the blueprint for our urban landscapes.
But what if that boring gray space is actually way more complex? What if it's a battleground for corporate strategy, a stage for these complicated deals between developers and City Hall, and even a reflection of some super hidden rules in our tax code? Well, let's find out.
To really get how this all works in the real world, we're going to look at a specific company. Let's talk about Biogen, a biotech giant in one of America's most jam-packed cities, and see how they're dealing with the daily chaos of the employee commute.
So, meet Biogen. They're a massive biotech firm right in the middle of Cambridge, Massachusetts. And if you've ever been there, you know it's one of the most crowded and expensive spots in the whole country. Now picture this. Over 3,000 employees are trying to get to work there every day. Yeah, parking is a total headache.
And here's the number that really tells the story. 62%. That's the percentage of their employees who still hold the parking pass. So despite all their efforts to get people to try other options, driving is still king.
So how is Biogen trying to fix this? Well, not by building more parking garages. Instead, they've got this whole suite of creative incentives. We're talking huge transit subsidies, private shuttles that have Wi-Fi and coffee, and they'll even pay you cash to not drive. They've even got this guaranteed ride home program in case you have an emergency. Pretty smart stuff.
And this chart shows you how it's all shaking out. So yeah, driving is still the big slice of the pie at 62%. But look at the rest. Almost a quarter of their employees are taking the transit pass, and another 15% combined are using those park and ride and cash out options. It proves that with the right incentives, you can start to change behavior, even if it's a slow burn. But this isn't just about employees. It's also about the space around the office.
Right. So the story doesn't stop with getting employees to and from work. The actual land these big companies build on, well, that's part of a much bigger and way more complicated urban bargain. And that brings us to this key idea: privately owned public space, or POPs for short. I guarantee you've seen these. They're those super clean, perfectly manicured plazas or little parks right next to a giant office tower. They look public, they feel public, but they're not. They're actually owned and controlled by the corporation that built the skyscraper. So why on earth would a developer build one? Simple. It's a trade. The city basically says, hey, if you create and take care of a public space at the bottom of your building, we'll let you build it bigger and taller than the rules normally allow. And of course, more floors means more rent, which means way more profit.
And the scale of this thing is just wild. In New York City alone, there are over 590 of these spaces. That's like adding 9 Bryant Parks worth of space to the city. Except it feels public, but it's really private.
But of course, this deal comes with a catch. What does it actually mean for a space to be public when a private company is calling all the shots? This is where things get really murky.
Okay, this is the really critical difference. A true public park that's run by the city, it's accountable to you, the voter, and it has to protect things like free speech. A POPs, on the other hand, is a whole different animal. It's controlled by a private owner, they set whatever rules they want, they hire their own security, and they have absolutely no legal duty to let you hold a protest or express a political opinion. There's just no public accountability.
And to manage these spaces, owners have a whole toolbox of tricks. We're talking everything from subtle design choices, like benches with armrests in the middle so you can't lie down, all the way to heavy surveillance and private security guards. It's all designed to kind of filter who feels welcome and control exactly how the space gets used. And this leads to a really powerful argument from the research. When certain people are subtly or not so subtly pushed out of these quasi-public spaces, it's not just about, no loitering. The idea is that it can actually become a denial of their full ability to participate in the civic life of their own city.
Okay, so we've looked at corporate strategy, we've looked at the public space bargain. Now we're going to the deepest, most invisible layer of this whole thing, the U.S. tax code.
Back in 2017, a major tax law got passed, and buried inside it was this fascinating little change. For the first time, companies could no longer get a tax deduction for the money they spend on employee parking. All of a sudden, every single parking spot for an employee became a direct hit to the company's bottom line.
So the IRS laid out this 4-step process for companies to figure out their tax bill. It's a little complicated, but stick with me. First, any cost for a spot that's specifically reserved for an employee, totally non-deductible. Step 2 is the big one, the primary use test. If more than half of the other spots are used by the general public, the company can deduct all those costs. If they fail that test, they have to keep going down the list, figuring out what they can and can't write off.
Here's a real-world example right from the IRS. Let's say a company spends $10,000 on its 500-spot parking lot. If just 50 of those spots are reserved for management, bam, $1,000 of those expenses can no longer be deducted. This law basically creates this huge financial incentive for companies to get rid of their employee-only park.
All right, let's zoom back out. We started with a simple parking lot, but we've ended up talking about corporate incentives, these controversial land deals between private companies and the public, and even the invisible hand of the tax code.
And this is what it all adds up to. On the left, you see a pretty standard city block, but on the right, you see a redeveloped version. It's probably the result of the exact kind of public-private deal we've been talking about, creating these nice, wide sidewalks, plazas, and shiny new corporate towers, all of it shaped by these forces that are usually hidden from view.
Which leaves us with one last really big question. From the commuter plan to the privately owned plaza to the tax code for parking spots, all these systems are shaping our cities. And it really makes you stop and think. When public space becomes a private asset, who is it really for? And at the end of the day, who truly benefits?